Let me give you the truth. So use X3 to get stronger. That's going to make you stronger than anything. Calisthenics are for when girls are around. Yeah, curls for the girls. So keep that in mind. Go to the park, some slow pull-ups, put some suntan oil on that makes you real shiny. Yeah, that's what calisthenics are good for.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Kyle Show. Lewis and I are curious college students looking to interview top performers, and we started this podcast with that goal in mind a little over a year ago, and in that time we've interviewed over 55 amazing people. Entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, people that are creating art and creating podcasts and writing books. It's really been an incredible experience, and today we have another one of those amazing people, Dr. John Jaquish.
I don't know if it's been a full year, but we're pretty close.
It is.
It's pretty close. But Dr. Jaquish is a PhD biomedical engineer. He started a company called Osteostrong, which is a revolutionary treatment for treating osteoporosis. That's not at all what we talked about. In the process of creating that technology, he learned about something he calls the force curve, which made him realize that we have dramatically more strength throughout different ranges of motion than most people realize, and that traditional weightlifting doesn't access that additional strength from the range of motion. So he created a tool called the X3, which is a at-home workout resistance band system to help people get additional resistance throughout the range of motion to fully maximize their strength. And it's been a kind of revolutionary technology. That's him on the cover of the book that Kyle just showed for the people watching on video. For those not, he's totally ripped. He was not totally ripped before creating this technology. In like 2 years, it completely transformed his body, and he wrote a book about the fitness routine he used with the equipment and what he learned in the process and why it, in his opinion, is superior to weightlifting. This conversation dives into the nitty-gritty about the fitness advice he gives, the nutrition advice he gives, and the kind of business advice about dealing with people who are not accepting what is his opinion is total facts and in their opinion is just an opinion, and how he deals with that while trying to introduce a technology that goes against convention in such a dramatic way with a title such as Weightlifting Is a Waste of Time. So it's actually the #1 best-selling book on Amazon in the men's health category right now, just a fun fact. So anyway, it was a pleasure and really interesting to talk to him. He's a controversial, high-energy guy, and it was one of our more fun conversations. So I hope you enjoy listening to the conversation, which I'm going to switch to now. Dr. Jaquish, thank you so much for coming on the podcast with us. We're excited to chat with you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I have so many questions for you about fitness, dieting, exercise, a lot of the controversial opinions you have. I binged your whole audiobook. Kind of this interview came together on short notice, so I've just got a ton of questions with you. One of the most, I guess, not alarming, but claims that most attacked my existing beliefs before reading the book is that carbohydrates aren't a macronutrient. Can you explain kind of what that idea is and if it's something I should contest or something I should take your word for?
Well, first of all, that was a great introduction, but I will say that I don't give any opinions. I have opinions on nothing. I present science. I present science, some of which, very little of which, I have done. But mostly, I want people to understand that these are not my words I'm telling them. It's other researchers that have come to this conclusion, and I also don't cherry pick. Like, if there's conflicting research on a subject, I will say there is conflicting research on the subject. But here, maybe the side that you have not heard about. So I'm not going to have like 20 pages on carnivore nutrition and 20 pages on, vegan nutrition, because we've been getting that crap since we've been little kids. And that's untrue. So, and also it's been funded by Kraft and, Nabisco. And by the way, Kraft and Nabisco, they know vegans don't eat kale. They know vegans eat cookies and cake, vegan cookies and cake. So that's part of the reason that those biases are there, but I always call that out. So your question, carbohydrates, I say carbohydrates are not a macronutrient. Well, Webster's dictionary defines a macronutrient as something that is essential for life. And in 2005, the US Board of Nutrition determined that humans don't need carbohydrates at all, ever. Serves no purpose whatsoever, including fiber. And they, of course, had hundreds of references. Now, I did go through and grab some of those, and I put those in the book, Weightlifting Is a Waste of Time. But now they're actually harder on carbohydrates than I am, because I do see a purpose. They're not a macronutrient, but I see a purpose for using carbohydrates as a performance enhancement. So right when my workout started, I had 80 grams of carbohydrates. And, you know, I mean, you can tell, like, I just worked out, like I got a lot of blood in my musculature. So I'm also out of breath a little bit. Sorry about that. What you can do is use that to super hydrate muscle cells, and then you stretch and you actually create room for more growth. Mechanical growth space is actually a thing. There's a lot of research on it. And instead of growing bigger cells, cells actually split in this process. It's called hyperplasia. So now distance runners need carbohydrates as they run also. So I can come up with two performance enhancement properties that carbohydrates have. But as far as muscle protein synthesis or living a longer life, or, you know, you need fiber. Like, first of all, let's go over how stupid the fiber recommendation is. Fiber is like, oh, you need like stuff, like material to help clean out your system. That's like having a plugged up toilet and throwing like 20 paper towels in it and flushing it 10 times. Does that unplug your toilet? No, it causes it to be even more plugged up. And now you got to call a plumber because you're an idiot. So like, that's like the fiber logic. It makes no sense whatsoever. It never did. And the research is very clear. You don't need it. So I don't know, but of course, what does Nabisco sell? It sells Triscuits, fiber. And they want to say
carbs.
fiber. Right. It's just marketing. Like, it's marketing via science.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's
Marketing
might
via
be
purchased science. Yeah.
it,
You don't need
it
it.
might.
I haven't
yeah, I was
had
gonna
fiber in years.
Well, you look great, judging from your Instagram and your post-workout vibes now. But I'll tell you, it's even worse than you think. My sister is a self-proclaimed, self-celebrating junk food vegan. That's a new term where they celebrate the amount of processed vegan crap they eat. So it's a whole new level of problems there. But I
revised some cemeteries and tell her to pick out her plot. Because I mean, that's diabetes. She's on the diabetes train.
I'll send her this interview. It's gonna rock some worlds a little bit. But
we
one
should get
question
her on here, and then I could, heckle her the whole time.
That would be fun. I don't know how productive it takes a while to open up someone's mind. I don't like
singling people out. Like, I talk about, like, there is a vegan community that is like kind of religious about their nutrition. I mean, religious about nutrition.
Yeah, I watched the vegan. I wanted to find as many conflicting perspectives because I was very persuaded by your book. So I looked up as much criticism of it as I could, and I found the Vegan Gains video. If you're familiar with that one.
Oh, and that guy's a character.
That was it was some funny stuff. But I have one specific question because this was kind of a very self-aware, stupid moment I had when listening to your book. Specifically on I'm going to mess up the word, the hyperplasia chapter about muscle hydration. You talk about how creatine is like a way to achieve it. And then in the next paragraph, you're like, but exogenous creatine leads to Parkinson's. So I literally, at the start of that chapter, poured creatine in a glass, mixed it up. And then before I drank it, you're like, and it causes Parkinson's. And I dumped it down the sink right after hearing you tell me that. Okay. So what's the verdict on that? Like,
let me give you a little more. So isolated so you get a ton of creatine from meat. That's what I'm saying in that comment. I probably should have specifically said that. That's on a list of like 50 things, by the way, I want to fix in the next version of the book. Because I never said it was from meat.
I literally dumped it out.
Supplement. So you probably did the right thing, pouring it down the drain. But yeah, so that's what I meant to say. I just didn't give the detail, in natural nutrition. You get a ton of creatine in meat. And meat's all I eat. So
a pre-workout steak, and then to maximize hyperplasia, or just having it in the system.
I eat my meat at the end of the day. No, you don't need it to. So, well, in the way I talk about it as a vasodilator and retaining more water, like if somebody were a vegan, I would tell them to go for the creatine because they're not getting it in meat, right? And I'll be like, yeah, go for creatine pre-workout. So, I mean, there's no like hard, fast rule about any of these things, because if somebody's got, let's say they just can't get meat. Like, I don't want to pick on vegans. Like somebody who just can't get a hold of meat. Like, you're in the military and you're stationed in some place where it's just like insanely expensive to have meat. So, and I know guys like this. So, what do? They take their Fortagen with them and they take some creatine with them. I mean, but from a vasodilator perspective, like, I hate saying it, just get Viagra. It doesn't matter what it is. You just tell your doctor, like, just hook me up, bro. Don't say you're using it to enhance muscle growth, because they don't know that. Like, what MD is worried about that? Like, none. So, like, just say, give me a little help. I got a girlfriend that's pretty excited about me, which they believe when I say because I'm so handsome. But they, it's just like you just say, like, come on. And they're like, oh, okay. Like they'll prescribe Viagra like candy. And then you just use it right before the workout. And then you have your carbohydrates right after the workout and the muscle swells and you'll notice the growth.
One more question for you about the veganism, and then I hope that Kyle and I will ask some higher level questions. We kind of got into the weeds right off the bat here.
I feel like you should tell him that you were a vegan for a while, Lewis. I
was also vegan for a long time. I've played the extremes, but
I tried it too.
But you tell this, one of the best parts of the book, in my opinion, is you say, we didn't come into this research opinionated. We developed the fitness product first, and then as positioned as people selling a fitness product, people wanted nutrition advice from us. We looked for what the best nutrition was to complement this. If the answer we found was veganism, that would be the answer we were sharing, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
So that's why that's not what you
I wouldn't recommend it anything. And I was totally open-minded. I was just like, I want to give the users of X3 the most optimized way to be in the best shape as possible. And coincidentally, being in the best shape as possible also will force you to live the longer and happier life, because the two greatest drivers of long life are being lean and being strong. That's it. So lean and strong, that's clearly what X3 is doing better than anything else. So we got to allow people to get the most out of it.
Absolutely. So the most troubling criticism I did find from that vegan gains video that we laughed about a minute ago was you're just now saying, animal protein is the best source of protein, but Fortagen is vegan. Can you clear up that disconnect for me, that your protein supplement is vegan, but you recommend a meat diet? I'm sure there's a great answer. I just wasn't smart enough to clear it up.
It's not vegetable.
So what does Fortagen come from? I know it's an amino acid profile, but how do you make that?
Bacterial fermentation. And honestly, we should be eating rotten meat, but there's some safety issues there, right? I mean, you can get some. So the idea is the human digestive system and essential amino acids really steer us toward, like if the three of us, were living a couple thousand years ago and we had to just kill like a whale that was halfway washed up on the beach, or a woolly mammoth or something like that, more than 2,000 years ago, maybe 5,000 years ago. By the time we would feast on that thing in the last couple of days, that meat wouldn't be so fresh. And we'd be like chasing, dogs and hyenas away and shit like that, or whatever type of thing would be scavenging that. And so we'd be eating a lot of rotten meat, and we'd actually get better essential amino acids from that meat. But you can make anything rot and have bacteria grow on it. So yes, the product is vegan friendly, but it's not made of vegetables, and nothing died to produce it. But like vegans, I don't think they even know what bacteria is. It's just like, well, is it animal or plant? It's like, there's more than animal and plant. Sorry. I've ruined a lot of vegan lives by telling them that, but whatever.
Yeah, I really like how you are polarizing. I think it's inspiring for me, at least, because in our podcast, the last, we've published 50 episodes now, and we've done not a great job of like really holding out and just saying our strong opinions. I don't know why. I think there are a lot of reasons to it, but could you talk to us about like where the confidence inside of you comes from to just be able to piss off people with every sentence, every book title, like no matter what?
That's a good question. I tell you what, it is the reason I speak with absolute conviction is because I'm absolutely right. So you have, like, when you're going to make a presentation that's going to rattle somebody's cage. I mean, look, most people just go to a job or they speak on some subject that, tens of thousands of people have spoken on before, and they may have a different PowerPoint than the other guy. But it's the same shit over and over and over again. Nobody's really trying to change anything. Well, if I get out of bed, I'm trying to change the world. So when I first came up with the bone density medical device, I researched it till I was at the point where I was like, there was no way I was wrong. Like I've taken a very simple and elegant approach to looking at what was previously seen as a complicated biochemical problem, but I saw it as a mechanical problem. And so my solution was so much easier. Like these guys, and I've met the absolute top researchers in the world. I've had drinks with them. I cannot drink all of them, by the way. That's kind of cool. So these guys are brilliant. They're professors teaching about very high level bone stuff. And most of them are research professors. So all they have is PhD students that they deal with. And then they look at what I have and, kind of shake their head and they're like, this is awesome. They really want to punch holes in it. And they're like, you're not wrong. Like, now, what the worst thing I've ever heard, and this is from like the top guy in the field, or at least he was like 3 years ago. So he probably still is. Not a lot changes there. And he says to me, how do you get people to use it? And he goes, we can't even get people to take their meds. They won't take the pills. And I said, well, it's amazing because the pills make you feel like shit, but this makes you feel great. It's like literally like an exercise or bone. It compresses. So this is the humerus bone. We compress that bone from end to end with hundreds of pounds. I mean, I can put 2,000 pounds from my humerus bone right here. So when that happens, the bone springs back into position, and then the whole bone matrix, that honeycomb that you look at, like all the little walls, that pulls in minerals and recalcifies and builds more little walls and makes the bone more powerful. And when somebody who's lost a lot of bone density, like postmenopausal female who has osteopenia or osteoporosis, the bone starts to grow in density. And so I had to experiment with it. I had to research everything about it. And I could speak with absolute conviction that this is right. Now, when it came to variable resistance, the big challenge I had to convince myself of, and so I'll tell you, like the practice of the absolute conviction for the second time was looking at the bone density data and saying, wow, these postmenopausal women are putting like 7 times their body weight or 8 times or 9 times through their legs. Like the strongest people in the world can't even do that. Now, of course, they're only moving it about that far. And that far, by the way, is the compression of their bone. The fixture doesn't even move. So, I mean, their bones are actually being compressed and you can see it. But I'm like, they're so powerful in that range of motion. And then one of the physicians, the study was done at the University of East London. And so I spent, a couple months in London going back and forth, making sure they're using the product right. I couldn't be involved in the study for conflict of interest, but I wrote the protocol and the methods for the study. So you look at this and they're like dealing with huge amount of weights. And all the doctors were like, what do people even lift in the gym? Because this just seems like weights that, like guys in strongman contests don't lift. And I'm like, well, you're right about that. And then I would look at, so the American College of Sports Medicine keeps a database of exercise data, or they reference the NAINS database. It's not theirs, but it's part of the National Institute of Health. And it's the largest collection of health data, especially exercise focused, in the world. And so there's like 20,000 people in there, and it grows by about 2,000 a year. Looked at that as far as what the average lifts are. Now, leg press doesn't count because most of the weight in the leg press is going down into the ground. So you're sliding it at a 45-degree angle. It's like, oh, I leg pressed 1,000 pounds. It's like, no, you didn't. Maybe half of that, because the other half went into the ground. But that's like math, and it's too hard for gym people. So I could go on. I could go on for a long time about the jokes and the comments. I get every word misspelled. It's awesome. So I'm like, okay, people are on average, unathletic people can typically start with 1.3 times their body weight. Athletic people, it's 1.53 times their body weight. But then we have postmenopausal women using the bone density medical device who are dealing with 7 times their body weight, 8 times their body weight, 9 times their body weight. So it was like 7, 8, and 9 right across the board. Like everybody was right in there. So it wasn't like there was one person with 2 multiples of body weight or 4. It was all 7, 8, and 9, every single person in the study. And so I thought, okay, after doing that calculation, comparing those 2 databases, I think I did a Spearman row test. And I did a couple of different statistical tests that were just wrong, like trial and error. Like, how do I like show this? Basically, you're 7 times stronger in your impact ready range than you are in your weaker range. So like in a push-up position, when your nose is close to the ground, that's the weakest. And when your arms are almost locked out, so 120-degree angle between the upper and lower arm, and with the back of the hand in line with the clavicle. So like you wouldn't do this, you wouldn't put your hands up or down, like it would be that exact position when you're to catch yourself when you fall. And that happens to be the top of a bench press position naturally. unless you like bench press with a Smith machine and you're trying to injure yourself, because that's what that does. So looking at that data, I knew, like, wow, like we're 7 times stronger in one particular range of motion versus the weight that we pick, which really means we only pick a weight we can handle in our weaker range. And what do we know about the weaker range? You're firing the absolute least amount of muscle.
To injury too.
Yeah, and that's where you overload joints. And like Peter Attia, I don't know if you guys know who Dr. Peter Attia is.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah.
I love the zero fasting app.
Yeah, yeah. Peter says he doesn't really care for weightlifting because it overloads joints and underloads muscle. Like he was thinking the same thing I was. And so it was like, whoa, like I think I just figured out how to fix this. We need massive variance. And not just like a little band that you add to your weights, like a huge difference between lighter, like, weak range to stronger range. And that's what I did. That's what I developed.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that, you just mentioned a little bit ago, a lot of the criticism for you and the system come from people who don't have like anonymous profiles, misspelled names, misspelled all the words. And then all your testimonials are from like the titans of like biohacking and these fitness industries. It's Ben Greenfield and Dave Asprey and
40
MMA fighters.
Athletes. How about that? Can you name another product that has 40 professional athletes endorsing
like
it?
Entire sports teams.
Right.
Yeah. So I have a very specific question actually about push-ups. So I've not been lifting weights mostly because 1, injuries, and 2, just been into calisthenics for a while. How do calisthenics fit into like an optimal program with the X3? Should like the X3 be for strength and calisthenics are for skills because like I enjoy them? Or like if I bought an X3, should I stop doing push-ups and exclusively use that for my chest? Or like where do the two kind of play together? So I'm sold that lifting weights, I'm going to hurt myself and waste my time, but I do still enjoy calisthenics. So what would be optimal for someone like myself?
I'm going to give you the truth. So use X3 to get stronger. That's going to make you stronger than anything. Calisthenics are for when girls are around. Yeah, curls for the girls. So keep that in mind. Go to the park, some slow pull-ups, put some suntan oil on that makes you real shiny. Yeah, that's what calisthenics are good for. Yeah, because it's not variable resistance. Like you're not going to, like when you're holding, your arm up, you're not able to put more resistance right here than you are here. And so it's just like lifting weights. Now, there are people who apply variable resistance to calisthenics, and that's just called having really shitty form. That's another great way to get injured. So, they're kipping really hard.
Exactly.
Like, I see CrossFitters that are like, I do 40 pull-ups, and then you watch and you're like, you watch them, do this up and down, and you're like, yeah, that's 0, 0, 0. Okay. Yeah. And also, you won't grow from that. So don't, yeah.
I was a skinny guy doing 30 butterfly pull-ups back in the day. So I was trying to get stronger being vegan at CrossFit. That was just, I'm a product of the misinformation, clearly.
I'm glad we're talking to you now and not back then. But on the X3, so one of my mentors, he uses the X3 for working out. He loves it. He wanted me to tell you that.
Sounds like a brilliant man.
Yeah, well,
he's very successful.
Hooked up with Ben Greenfield, and so he got it through there. But his question that he wanted me to ask was, does it ever make sense to do greater than 1 set per exercise?
Generically, no, because you get so devastated with 1 set. Now, there is something, why you don't have 2 girlfriends at once?
Yeah, I know, for sure.
Yeah, because it's a fucking pain in the ass. You got to remember what movie you saw with which one. So you just don't do that. You guys should probably write that down. So, it's just too much work. And also, they tend to not get along. Like, you can get 2 kittens and they'll play. Get 2 girlfriends? No, they won't do that. So the problem, if you're going to do a second set, is you subconsciously half-ass the first one. There's no way around this because your body knows like it's going to have to do it again. And then you have a lousy first set. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that, because of the variance, you can devastate a muscle so fast with X3 with just 1 set. Like, why would you do a second one? Like, because then you're just diluting. You want to get as much work done in a short a period of time, right? Like that is intensity of stimulus. The more intense the sunlight you can get on your skin in the shorter period of time, the better your tan's going to be, right? If you get a hard abrasion on your hand, you get a callus. You get a light abrasion for a long period of time, you get a blister, right? So like all stimuli to the human body that can create an adaptation has to do with the intensity of exposure in the briefest possible period of time. So that's really the answer. I mean, I've given that answer like 1,000 times. I don't know, like a lot of people find it satisfactory, but then, like unfortunately Dorian Yates was like, in a perfect world, we'd only do one set, but we don't live in a perfect world. So I do too. And it's like, dude, now, of course, he's also lifting standard weights, which have all kinds of biomechanical inefficiencies, which is why I would never spend my time lifting weights. As the book is called, weightlifting is a waste of time, like that's where I'm coming from. Like if you can get such perfect exhaustion with one set. By the way, I put on 60 pounds of muscle with this thing and I've never been sore. I've never done more than one set. I can play like, you guys probably don't, I don't know if anybody plays golf anymore. I think golf courses are going to be turned into cemeteries or something. Do you play golf?
No, I said they're going to be used as cemeteries for vegans.
Probably. Yeah, probably. So yeah, I mean, like I can go play golf. And the reason I use golf as an example is you can't have a pump and play golf unless, and I mean, it's not because of the pump, it's because the joints are irritated and you lose some accuracy because you get some neural inhibition. Like your joints are like, no, we don't want to move. No, sit down, except you're not sitting down, you're playing golf. And so like your accuracy just sucks. Like the day after you lift or the day you lift. I just got done lifting. I could go play golf right after this podcast. No problem.
I think that you need to make your before pictures easier to find because that's one of the biggest problems that I found in doing research. Yeah. Just, you look like you're huge now and you're just a much bigger than average dude. It looks like at the start of this journey. And that, like, I think gives some people some trouble saying that you put on 60 pounds because it's a big recomposition. You're already like a big framed person. I don't know. You just,
I
you weren't
lost
like
a lot of body fat too. Yeah,
exactly. That's why it's a recomposition. Like you don't look 60 pounds heavier in the sense that you're just like some people make a more dramatic change because you started out as less of a total beginner. I don't know. I was going to say that neural inhibition as well. I think that's one of the things that really clicked for me when reading the book. That and the like thinking of weight training or not weight training. That's just my bias there. Thinking of training in terms of like maximizing the hormonal response is super interesting. So I want to ask one question that a mentor of mine, it's actually the local rabbi at Alabama, wanted to ask. He's kind of a biohacking rabbi, rare find, but he's been doing 16-8 for quite a while. Like, and last time we'd spoke, he was super into it. And then I hung out with him last night and he's like, I stopped doing it because I feel like it was bringing diminishing returns. And so his question to me, kind of thinking with a historical question, what's this?
I have, did you see my last like Instagram, my second last Instagram post?
Probably
yeah.
not.
Oh no. I like said 16-8 is like, it's like, that's a first step. You do that for one day and then you move on to one meal a day. Cause that's the problem. It's like, it really doesn't do much for you.
Yeah.
It's not
he did it for a couple of months and then felt like it wasn't providing benefits anymore. So he was
exactly. Like I just talked about this.
Reading his intuition correctly.
Yeah.
So the progression is to go not more difficult, but longer periods of fasting and to OMAD.
The longer the fasted period, the better. But also like when somebody's lifting, you're a performance athlete. I have learned that my willpower is a little bit stronger. And by a little bit, I mean like insanely stronger than most people's. Like I've done 5 days, no food. I've done 3 days, no food, no water, like just to check it out. But I realize, in fact, I just filmed a new set of nutrition videos yesterday that really keeps like the normal person in mind. There's nothing normal about me. Like I will run an experiment that people would think you're probably going to die if you run that experiment. But of course I know the clinical literature and I'm like, no, I'll probably be better than I am now, but whatever, you can think that. So 16-8, like it's not long enough. The benefits of fasting start after 12 hours. So you're only getting, like 4 hours of benefit out of 16-8. So just push it out to 24 hours. Get 12 hours of fat loss. And then, of course your one meal a day, make that carnivore. So, the body can store fat, it can store carbohydrates. In fact, that's really all it does, but it can't store protein. So if you're going to overfeed on protein. And then you just got to sleep with the window open because you're going to be hot. And you go into thermogenesis. Yeah, I'm like boiling at night.
I heard you mention on we're friendly with Nicholas Hutchison. We interviewed him a couple months back and have stayed in touch. And you mentioned that on days you're not fasted, you have to keep your house at like 63 degrees. Otherwise, you'll burn up. And most people be uncomfortably cold. But when you're fasted, you don't have to do that. So that's pretty interesting to be able to like directly observe that effect in yourself.
Oh, like I have 2 settings, fasted or not fasted, on my air conditioning system. I just walk in and flip the switch. Like if I haven't eaten in like 2 days, I'm cold. Yeah, but if if I come back from like the steakhouse, sometimes I'll have a little less Fortagen and enable myself to eat a 64-ounce steak. Those last like 8 ounces, like it's work. But if I turn the AC down to like 64 or something like that, oh my God, it's like the most perfect feeling. It's like a hibernate. So
yeah.
great.
I just connected the dots that the meat sweats are a real thing. Yeah.
What?
I said I just connected the dots that the meat sweats are a real thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Real
yeah.
thing.
That expression deserves to be an expression, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it, Kyle.
A little bit off topic here, but Lewis and I like this concept of the permissionless apprentice. I think it's coined by a guy named Jack Butcher in Visualize Value. But there's this character in your story, Henry Alkire.
Alkire, yes.
Alkire, who's just really interesting to me. It seems like he sort of just came into your life full force, and then that's a pretty valuable intern that he turned into. So could you tell us a little bit about him? And
he's my best friend also.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a biomedical engineer also. Do you want me to just drag him in here?
Sure.
For some context for people listening, the book tells the story where John's still working on Osteostrong and needs an intern to help him like prototype something. And he's like a freshman at Cal Poly, if I'm getting that correctly. And then he proceeds to be like longtime business partner, co-inventor for a super long time. And I did not have that many useful skills my freshman year to where I would have been making substantial.
How did he do this?
Unfortunately, he's in the middle of running an experiment. I got some pretty awesome stuff in the works. So yeah, but Henry I think he's the smartest person I've ever met.
Oh wow,
just brilliant. Yeah, I mean he's a lot younger than me. He started working. That's when he was 18.
Yeah. So how did that happen? When I was a freshman,
how did y'all find each other?
Now I don't have like the skills necessary to jump into some biomedical company working on innovative
add value.
Osteoporosis.
I was like, we hired him to do CAD work. Just wireframes and 3D graphics and stuff like that. But he was aerospace engineering at the time. And he immediately switched to biomedical engineering because he was so fascinated with what we were doing. And he read my book and the first book, Osteogenic Loading. And then, we just worked really well together. And I mean, we can kind of finish each other's sentences now. I'm abrasive and he's the opposite of abrasive. So, like sometimes I'll be like, hey, should I say this? And he's like, no, the National Guard may be called if you say that. Yeah. So, sometimes he's a great sounding board, but really smart guy. And y'all make a scientific argument. And then 99% of the time he's like, yeah, you can make that. And then the other, 1% he might be like, you can make that stronger, because so I'm actually conservative when it comes to writing. But when I say stuff, I'm a little more, I don't know, like if a group of people is being irrational or generally unintelligent, I'll point it out. I won't pick out an individual though. So somebody, will be like, and I'll pick somebody I actually like. Somebody will be like, well, what do you think of Lane Norton? And I'm like, I actually think Lane's a really smart, good guy. And he references a lot of research that, he doesn't like fasting. And he's kind of picked a side in what has become like a religious war. I recommend caloric deficit and fasting. Like, why does it have to be either or? Like, in fact, you can gain muscle while on a caloric deficit if you had a protein surplus. So who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. Like, there's good research for both. So just apply both. So like, I'm not like a religious war kind of guy. And if somebody wants to be a vegan, I can help them. But, it's certainly not what I'm going to do. Right.
So I have a couple questions. You had mentioned Henry's a very smart partner and he's working on something really exciting. This kind of reminded me of a question I want to ask you. So the X3 bar standalone seems like an incredible piece of fitness equipment. Question I have for you is, you have a lot of other stuff on your website that is expensive and interesting, which is a dangerous combination. The vibration plate, the supplements, the Fortagen, the coffee replacement. How essential to achieving optimal results is adding the additional add-ons versus just buying the X3 bar? So if I'm pretty sold, but on a college that I want the X3 bar, but I'm on a college budget, should I be beating myself up for not being able to afford the vibration plate, or is that really icing on the cake for the extreme person?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because the vibration plate will give you an extra 5% fat loss because of the instability firing and the upregulation of growth hormone. It's great, but don't go into debt for that. I would say, X3 is as high as a priority as you can make it. Fortagen's right there too. I mean, unless, you get tons of red meat, you're in college. I don't know how your cafeteria is, but mine was always all you can eat. So I would just have a platter of steaks. I mean, I don't know. I was on the rugby team. They didn't like any of us. Also, we would start food fights and we'd wrestle in there and knock shit over. They hated us. I think a lot's changed since I went to college.
I'd say a lot.
Well,
a lot has changed.
Well, I was thinking about the fraternity. I was going to ask you a question. It doesn't really play into anything, but I know you're the president of your fraternity. I was going to say that if you were transplanted into the fraternity house today, I think that you'd still be able to enjoy it somewhat. I don't think it'd be that different.
This is true, because I was hanging out with the undergrads, about last year, and it felt like right at home. And then they got in huge trouble right after that for doing all kinds of stuff they weren't supposed to do. And I'm like, wait, we're not supposed to do that? I do that all the time.
Right.
So, I was all about my fraternity. You can still see my fraternity letters branded on my arm. Baby. Most amazing fraternity, most amazing experience. So what the hell did you ask me before we got sidetracked?
Pretty much. You gave me a pretty solid answer there about saying the X3 bar is truly the priority and everything else is essentially icing. Fortagen's useful too.
X3 and Fortagen. See, Fortagen's really cheap. If you think one scoop of Fortagen replaces an 8-ounce steak in protein value, when someone's like, well, it's more expensive than whey protein. Yeah, well, I wouldn't put whey protein in a cat's litter box. It's fucking worthless. So, ain't worthless. It's 18%.
Better than broccoli. But
yeah, better than broccoli, right. It's just higher value. It's great. And you certainly can't get an 8-ounce steak for $2.
No, you can't. Not even at all.
That's what it is. It's $2 a serving. So I would say it's the cheaper option, but also it'll keep you lean as hell. So what I do right now is I do because I got 250 grams of protein. I got to have 1 gram per pound of body weight. I'm 240. So I do 4 doses of Fortagen, so that accounts for 200 grams. And this is so I did a video about this nutrition yesterday. This is kind of like the minimum commitment nutrition is what we're calling it. And I actually prefer it. And I'm the one with that's where I was going when I was talking about I have willpower. My willpower is insane, but sometimes maybe the easier approach is the one that's just sustainable. More Fortagen, and I actually spend way less money because I only eat I would normally go to a restaurant and get 4 entrees in my 1 meal a day. But or the steak for the whole table, the 64-ounce porterhouse. I don't do that anymore. I'm going to steakhouse tonight, and I'll probably have the 8 or 12-ounce fillet. It's not like they don't have to fuss over me anymore.
You get enough protein from the Fortagen because it's so
right.
available.
You're getting the majority of the
you get to skip the steak appetizer before the steak entree now, so that's good.
Well, I've done that too. I've had a steak for an appetizer, 3 steaks for my main course, and then when everybody else is eating dessert, I'll get a small fillet.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So my next question for you, we share in that our mothers.
Wait, one thing.
Yeah.
It's X3, Fortagen, and then I would say if you want a coffee replacement, Imperium is great. It's like an energy drink with an appetite suppressant. It's like a pre-workout, but the medium chain. So it's if it's replacing something that you're already doing anyway, then it's kind of the net cost is 0. So instead of coffee at Starbucks every morning, you have an Imperium and you're keeping, a lot more money in your pocket. That covers everything. I wanted to fully answer that question.
No, they're perfect. People, thank you for that.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Thanks for the question. It's good.
So my mom has osteoporosis. Her mom does too. And, you know, that's close to my heart. And that's actually the reason that I found you in the first place. It was months and months ago. But like, what exact prescription should I give to her? Because she's not going to tear through any sort of scientific articles, or like, if I tell her something, I think she's pretty much going to say, okay, like I'll do whatever it takes. So like, what should I tell her that she should be doing to make it better, or like extend her life, or, you know?
Is there an Osteostrong location near her?
That's what I was going to ask you.
There's some in Alabama.
There are in Birmingham.
I looked on, I don't know about Birmingham, but the state.
Birmingham has one, yeah.
Okay.
There's a couple in Alabama, actually. In fact, they're run by a guy. His name is Josh Fandrich, huge X3 user, really strong dude.
I was gonna say, is he huge?
It's huge.
So I have another question for you here. Kind of, I'm sure you're familiar with the 80-20 principle. Just, you know,
Sure. Like
80% of the causes come from 20% of the inputs. So what would be, you have a lot of opinions in the book, not opinions, a lot of arguments made in the book about testosterone and optimizing testosterone. What would be the biggest mistakes to avoid and or biggest changes to make to just like 3 to 5 things total, maybe, to like for everyone for better testosterone overall? Because you make a really good argument about the importance of that for every result you want as an athlete.
So the biggest issue with testosterone, how do I answer this in a politically correct way? They're chasing the wrong thing. It's not the testosterone that counts. It's how many receptor sites are open. So, you know, your body's going to use what it wants to use. It's sort of like when you're hungry, your body needs to make some cells and it needs to process some other stuff. It's like when, you know, ghrelin and leptin get upregulated when you're hungry, and that happens for various reasons. So to get a testosterone receptor site activated, there's only one way to do it, and that is put extremely heavy loads on the body. And so, you know, you can have a natural level of testosterone, which I do, and you can grow a lot more muscle if you can put staggering amounts of weight on a muscle. Now, and I, of course, recommend doing it without a weight. Do it with variable resistance. You know, there had been a need, because people were like, is there an easy way at home that can emulate X3? And I'm like, well, if there was, I would have just written a book about that and not bothered developing a consumer product, because there's no harder business to run than a consumer product business. So, yeah, like really, like when I chest press, I hold 550 pounds here, 300 pounds in the middle, and 100 pounds at the bottom of a chest press. When I get to that 550 pounds and I hit that 20 times, that's like a really big deal. That leaves an impression on the musculature, totally exhausting. But because I get to those peak loads, those receptor sites just open up. So that natural level of testosterone I have is just grabbed and used. Yeah. And like I get like NFL, because there's 15 NFL players I work with. They ask me all the time, they're like, you're bigger than I am. Why didn't you go in the NFL? I'm like, well, I don't have the genetics for it. And they're like, yeah, you do. Now, I think they're oversimplifying it. You got to be fast. You got to be fast without being injured. There's a lot of things that go into the skill of an NFL player, not just the raw strength. But I'm like, I looked like this after I turned 40. Like, and I figured some things out. I'm like, that's why you called me. That's why, you know, your strength coach said, look into this guy, because there's some things about like using testosterone, which don't require a supernatural level. You just use more of it by having a strategy, which is what the whole book talks about, a strategy to apply more force into the musculature than it's ever seen.
Great. Well, I think we're going to transition now into what we call our bonus round, just some rapid fire, just like little things that we want to know about. My first question is, what's your favorite car? I know I've seen you with a Lamborghini, Ferrari. Just what's your pick of the litter right now?
I'm really loyal to Lamborghini. Like, they just make such a badass car. It's faster. It's, you know, the shifts, like just boom. I mean, you feel like you got rear-ended every time you shift. Like it's just a staggering amount of power that you don't need, which is kind of like me. So yeah, it just fits my personality. It's just
Inventor. Which one? Huracan?
The Huracan's very drivable. So you got to realize that Lamborghini built the Aventador to set the record at the Nürburgring. And they did. They said it, and they said first the Huracan said it. So it was the fastest car in the world for like 2 years, which I think is like the longest anybody's ever held that record. And it was a Huracan Performante, which is basically what I have. I have the Performante without the wing. So I think the wing is just like tacky. And the last thing a Lambo needs is a wing. But if you look at which one they put in Le Mans, in Daytona, and Sebring, the 3 most important races outside of Formula One in the world, it's the Huracan. They don't race the Aventador. It's too big. It's too wide. It weighs an extra 1,000 pounds for 2 more cylinders. You know, it's a bad trade-off. It's really good at long straights, which the Nürburgring has a lot of. So it's like, it shines at like 220 miles an hour, which, you know, even on a racetrack is like kind of like no one goes that fast. So it's the Huracan. I checked out the Ferrari that's not even out yet, the F8. They invited me to a special event. I got to drive that. They also had me drive the Portofino. Yeah, don't get that one. Portofino is just like a prettier M3. Just get the BMW. I guess the Portofino was not. I mean, unless somebody really cares just about owning a Ferrari, is this the least expensive Ferrari? But it's not fun to drive. It's cool. It's luxurious. That's about it. Like, not my style at all. The F8 is really quiet. Like, it's a pleasant experience. That's not what I want. I want a brutal experience. I want, like, you know, the girl sitting next to me to get out of the car and be like, I'm so uncomfortable. Like, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, like, I didn't get this for your entertainment. I got it for mine.
That makes sense.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's so much fun to drive that car. There's a couple other things that I looked at and I like, but like probably the replacement to the Huracan will be whatever Lamborghini replaces the Huracan with. And I've made them crystal clear. I'm like, put me first on the list. Like, you call me for, you know, you need $100,000 deposit. I got it waiting. This first one's mine.
Well, that is awesome. Clear passion about cars there, and seems like you apply similar level of research interest that you do to fitness and nutrition.
I mean, if you care about stuff, there's things I don't care about that I, you know, may spend my money on. Actually, no, that's not true. I care about just about everything. You know, like steaks. Like, you guys know what a cinder grill is?
I do not.
You need one.
Let's hear it.
Way to cook meat. Like, you will
Cinder grill.
outdo the best steakhouses in the world with a cinder grill.
Can you paint a picture for me? Of like, nothing's come to mind in my head.
It's about this big, you know, maybe like 1.75 feet by 1.75 feet. It's about 8 inches deep, and you open it up and there's 2 grilling surfaces, but it sous vides your meat. So it cooks it evenly all the way through to, like, you know, like I get things, everything's rare for me.
Like
rare, black and blue. Sometimes it's like cold bloody center is what I want in my steak. I like it almost raw. Well, let's say I'm going to do a rare steak because, like, I'm going to, you know, have friends over or something like that because nobody else eats it raw other than me. So I'll sous vide it for like an hour and a half. So a thick, like Chateaubriand, like 2-inch thick steak cooks evenly all the way through, like an hour and a half. And then you sear it for like 20 seconds. And it is, because of the algorithm and the calculation of warming it throughout evenly, it's just like, you don't even need to let it sit to like even out the temperature. It is exquisite. Love it. You need a cinder grill. The Sigap House.
Right. I'll get that on the budget for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I just Googled it quickly, and it does not look like what I thought it was going to look like. And I love how passionate you are about these different things. I think it's awesome.
I actually promote that company, and I have no financial relationship.
Right. Maybe they'll shoot us some dollars for publishing.
It's just rad. It's just like the best way to cook piece of meat.
So,
and they're like, "Oh, you want to be an affiliate?" And I'm like, "No."
I have a question. So when I first started looking at this, it seems like, you know, new age technology, but when you begin to like dig into it, I think there are some historical examples of things that people used to do that are sort of in line with variable training. Do you agree with that? And what do you think that people?
You mean like chains?
Well, that would be a good example, right?
Chains and banding. Typically, you would see guys doing variable resistance based on what they saw from the videos at Westside Barbell. Now, Westside Barbell is a little different because they're trying to specialize every athlete into breaking world records. And because of their biomechanics or previous injuries or something, they may have a mid-range that's got an issue that they need to build up. And so they'll just load the mid-range. And, somebody doing sort of tiny reps to try and activate more musculature in the mid-range. They're almost doing like physical therapy for the world's strongest people. Very fine-tuned stuff. And there's a reason that one gym has broken 400 strength records in the world. And
That's the one in Ohio, right?
Say it again?
That's the one in Ohio?
Yeah. And they did it all with variable resistance. So my approach to variable resistance is very generic, and it is very much for the person who's not the professional strength athlete necessarily, and they don't need any rehab. It's like if you need joint rehab, just go get joint rehab and then go use the X3. Like if you can't raise your arm over your head, well, that's a problem whether you're strength training or not. So you should probably address that problem. So I don't want to take anything away from Louis Simmons and what they do at Westside, but they were on a track where nothing was really quantified, because that's what I did for this. Like everything is measured, everything is explained with scientific reference. So it's not my opinion. It's not just my method that can be measured or judged against anybody else's method. If you look at the science, it is absolutely superior. Anybody who read the book would know that. And coincidentally, the trolls I have, they never read the book. It's obvious in their comments. I'm sure everything you saw negative, they never tried the product and they never read the book.
I'll tell you the most, the red flag on all of them is if they include pictures. They're like, you could just build this for $100, and it's pictures of people with twisted ankles and twisted wrists doing 1/8 of the resistance. And I'm like, they've read not even the first chapter.
Right. I explained why bands by themselves are worthless.
They're great for like 10 to 20 pounds of resistance, but after that,
they're great for rehab.
Yeah, but your wrists and ankles on anything meaningful are just gonna not cooperate,
or they'll break.
That's what I meant. It's very, very uncooperative.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like you do a deadlift and you let the bands run underneath your ankles, and you put that's a serious heavy band. Your ankles are turning inward. And ask anybody in the NFL if the ankle joint likes lateral force. I mean, I think that's probably other than brain injury, I think it's the number 2 career ender in the NFL.
Yeah, that tragic injury on Alabama's football team beginning of the season. Jalen Waddle just tore his ankle right up opening play like the season and just ruins careers.
Yeah, right.
He's back, but
ruined a season.
Lewis and I are definitely sold on the X3, and we're definitely going to be customers of yours in the future. We really appreciate you coming on. I think it's a good place to end, where we started with, none of he doesn't have an opinion. There are no opinions. It's just science, and it's just full circle back to here and with variable resistance training. So thank you very much for your time today and sharing it with us.
Awesome, guys.
And that wraps up our conversation with Dr. John Jaquish. Just a really fun little hour of talking with him and feeling his energy, which is obviously off the charts. So a few lessons that I learned from that conversation, the first of which was how he had to really question a lot of conventional wisdom in order to reach the conclusions that he reached. And in order to do that, you have to be willing to think that, or to accept that what you thought in the past was wrong, and then to build off of knowing that and finding the answers through like a objective look at data. Like at one point, Lewis is like, he was saying how he liked in the book that if the data showed that a vegan diet was the best way to eat, that he would have included that in the book, but it just wasn't. So it's like an interesting way of looking at your assumptions and then building from, I guess, first principles. My next thing is that the X3 is just a really cool piece of machinery, and I'm sure that in the future we'll see different shoot-offs from Jaquish Biomedical that'll really blow our minds. But so far we've got the X3 and it's in the living room, and I'm really excited to wrap up this outro so that I can go use it. And then the last thing is that within fitness, like, you think about muscles and you think about how far you can run and all these different things, but really what we should be optimizing for is our endocrine system, and how just important hormones are and hormone production and regulation are in the pursuit of just overall health and fitness, and how it's sort of it's hard to track, hard to measure, hard to understand it, but that is what we should be looking at for fitness metrics.
Heck yeah, I completely agree, especially with that third one. Some of the fun difficulties of doing these conversations with authors and reading the book is I forget what takeaways are from the conversation and what takeaways are from reading the book in prep for the conversation. I'm like, did that come up or did I just read that from him? But that was my biggest takeaway from the book, which I would recommend. Weightlifting is a Waste of Time, Dr. John Jaquish on Amazon. My biggest takeaway from that book was that weightlifting, or just athletic activity with the goal of changing your physique and performance, is all about hormones. But my 3 takeaways from this conversation, the first one was his defense of why he recommends only doing 1 set to failure of every exercise. I thought he had a really interesting defense for that. He said, if you do a second set, you're always going to half-ass the first one because you need to leave some in the tank to be able to do that second set, so you never reach true exhaustion and you're kind of just wasting your time. I found that to be really persuasive, logically, and we will find out if it's experimentally true when I start experimenting with the X3, which, as Kyle mentioned, is in the living room, with Fortagen, his protein supplement. We went with both. So we're going to try the X3, supplement with his amino acid profile, which is vegan, but doesn't contradict his carnivore diet, which he addressed in this interview. My second takeaway is about carbs and fasting. I thought that was really interesting how he, kind of like Kyle said, is just willing to present the literature. The literature says carbohydrates aren't necessarily necessary for any human function, and carbohydrates, sorry, I got distracted, but that
I got distracted, my bad.
Carbohydrates aren't necessary for any human function, and that's a very, 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 as Kyle said, controversial opinion, and we'll see if we agree with that. I'm experimenting with it as well because I love to experiment. Haven't had much carbs, not over 50 grams in like a week every day. So we'll see if that comes true. And then when I asked about my rabbi's fasting protocol, he said the way to graduate from 16-8, unsurprisingly, is to spend more hours fasting. So I experimented with that as well, did a 36-hour fast over the weekend after this podcast and really enjoyed it. Last takeaway, kind of like what Kyle said about just the mental difficulty of being such a contrarian, of having such strong opinions that disagree so dramatically with reality. And kind of after reading his book and being like, okay, this makes sense. And I'm like, why isn't everyone using this yet?
Reality, but with convention.
Yeah, with the other people's sense of reality or whatever you want to call it. But kind of just takes time to change consensus. It's something I've started to realize. It's like Celsius, for example, that sports drink is super popular now. And like once I find out about something, I'm like, oh, why doesn't everyone know about this? And it's just because it takes a long time for things to go into people's minds and especially to change people's strongly held opinions. So everyone, especially when everyone's so married to their existing ideology, like veganism, like weightlifting, and when presented with arguments to the contrary, it's very difficult to change their minds. But that is all I have to say about this episode. We make a lot of other episodes, like Kyle said in the beginning. We have about 55, 56-ish other really great interviews. I would highly encourage you to look in our feed, check out some of the recent episodes. We published one with Scott Young, author of Ultra Learning, another awesome book that's crushed it on Amazon. Forward by James Clear, that's a fun fact. Then the episode before that with Nicholas Cole, he talks a lot about how he's been so successful writing online, bodybuilding, and just about in any skill he wanted to pursue. So those are 2 interviews I would highly recommend checking out if you enjoyed this one. If you want to support the show, please leave us a rating on iTunes to show that you think what we're doing is something we should keep doing. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in a week with the next episode.